your access point to Washington. I'm Aisha Tanzim. In his State of the Union Tuesday, President Barack Obama said that he's ready to make his counterterrorism policies more transparent.
I will continue to engage Congress to ensure not only that our targeting, detention, and prosecution of terrorists remains consistent with our laws and system of checks and balances, but that our efforts are even more transparent to the American people and to the world.
The statement comes at the heels of a debate in America on the legal justification of using drones to kill Americans far from a battlefield. But what about people who are not Americans? Drones and international human rights is our topic today, and joining us to talk about this from Miami via Skype is Philip Mudd. He's a senior research fellow for the New America Foundation. He focuses on issues of counterterrorism, intelligence, and homeland security with the Counterterrorism Strategy Initiative. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the first question I want to ask you is President's statement about being more transparent in his counterterrorism strategy. What does that mean in terms of policy?
I think the most basic question we're talking about here, particularly as it relates to Americans, but also more broadly on drone policy, will be how are targets chosen? What is the process by which the White House, the Central Intelligence Agency, the military, and others select a target? And should that process have some sort of more broader legal background when people choose a target?
Okay, so as you're talking about policy, is this going to be more transparent, not just about Americans, but also about international targets?
I suspect it will be, but I think the two will be viewed in Washington as fundamentally different. The question is going to be whether the president has authority unilaterally to declare a strike on a U.S. citizen. Obviously, for legal reasons, the targeting of people in places like the tribal areas of Pakistan would be different under U.S. law. But I think there will still be a broad policy debate about whether to expose to the public how decisions are made when drone strikes are undertaken in places like Pakistan.
Okay, now, would it be a fair comment, though? A lot of international commentators have said that when America has a debate like this and the world sees it, it sends out a message that Americans do not care about lives other than their own. They're so worried about hitting an American, they're not worried about hitting other people. Would that be considered a fair comment?
I can understand how someone would view it that way. As someone who was on the inside for a while, I don't quite think that's accurate. The process by which you're going to look at a target is pretty basic, and that's going to be someone who presents an imminent threat to the United States and others around the world. Whether that person is a Pakistani, an Afghan, a Yemeni, a Somali, or an American, to my mind, the debate is going to center around a simple concept that doesn't have anything to do with nationality, and that's going to be, if you have information that an individual, whether he's an American or not, is an imminent threat, do you have the right from the White House to call a strike on that individual?
Since you have been on the inside for a while, is the process the same for all individuals, be they Americans, Pakistanis, Yemenis, Somalis, Afghans, or somebody else? Is it the same process that takes place, or are there additional steps when somebody's an American citizen?
Look, I haven't been in for a while, and even if I had been, I wouldn't be able to comment specifically on the process. What I would say, though, is to go back to the point about imminent threat, regardless of whether there are changes in the process, if you have an American citizen, as we saw with Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, and we have information that he presents a threat to the United States, regardless of whether he's an American, somebody's going to have a pretty difficult decision to make, and that is, even if you can't bring him to a court of law, is it appropriate for the president and others to have the authority to have him killed via drone strike? So the process might be different, but the questions are going to remain the same, whether it's a Pakistani or an Afghan or an American. Do you have the right to strike that individual?
Okay, now I want to welcome another guest of ours. We are joined in our New York studios by Maria McFarland, or she's the Deputy Director of the U.S. Program in Human Rights Watch. Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And before we go on, do you call it Maria or Maria?
Maria.
Maria, okay, I apologize for that. Maria, welcome to the show. Have you been able to hear anything that we were talking about before you joined us?
I'm afraid I cut only a little bit at the end there.
So we were discussing whether this whole debate on drone strikes and whether it's okay to hit Americans unilaterally without having a trial with drones, does it send a message out to the world that it is more important for America to care about American lives than it is to care about the lives of others?
That may be. I mean, under international human rights standards, it really doesn't matter what the citizenship of the person in question is. The analysis of whether you can target them under the laws of war or under international human rights law is the same. The question is whether the person is directly participating in hostilities and whether there's an armed conflict. With the case of al-Awlaki, what the key to the analysis there would be, was he playing an operational role in an ongoing armed conflict with the U.S., or was he simply a propagandist? Whether or not he was a U.S. citizen wouldn't really matter under international standards. That being said, U.S. constitutional law may offer additional protections, and it's understandable that U.S. citizens would want to have those protections enforced. What we would call for is that international law also be enforced.
Okay, now before we go on, we asked a Facebook question and we asked comments from our visitors, our viewers. Let's put that Facebook question up on the screen so everybody can see it. We asked, do you think the use of drones is ever justified? Some of the comments that we received, Syed Majid Hussain Shah said, no, we don't support such way of USA. It's like might is right. No, not under no international law supports such decision attacking drones. It's against the sovereignty of any country. There were some other people who agreed with him. Ibrarullah Fateh said, no, it's not justified. By doing so, thousands of innocent people are being killed. Therefore, it must be stopped. Some other people condemning these, and drone strikes must be stopped right now. So going back to this question of drone strikes under international law, where do we draw the line between a criminal activity which requires you to bring someone into a court of law and try them, and an act of war which maybe allows you under international law to go and strike them down? And I'll start with you, Maria, and come to you, Philip.
Well, international law sets out standards. You'd have to have an armed group with a certain level of organization, that there has to be a certain level of violence involved, such that you're talking about an armed conflict between the U.S. and another country, or the U.S. and an armed group. You know, if you're just talking about one individual sitting at home plotting an attack, that's not an armed group and that's not an armed conflict.
Philip, where do you think the government should or does draw that line?
I think the line should be drawn where Maria was drawing earlier, and that relates to the case of al-Awlaki. Look, people involved in things like fundraising or propaganda may be supporting a terrorist group, but to take an action like a drone attack against an individual is a profound act. And to my mind, the line ought to be imminent threat. That is, can you show to some level of satisfaction for policymakers that an individual is involved in operational activity that poses an imminent threat? Propaganda doesn't meet that standard. Fundraising doesn't. But if you're sending people, as al-Awlaki did, to take an aircraft down over Detroit, Michigan, I think that clearly meets the standard.
Okay, let's go back to this question of imminence. As you both probably know, a white paper was leaked from White House, made public by NBC, that talked in detail about the legal justification used for killing Americans far from a battlefield. Imminence was described very broadly there. Maria, do you want to comment on what that description or definition of imminence might do?
Yeah, there was a very broad definition of imminence there. You know, that whole white paper was a very confused legal analysis. It tended to lump together different areas of law, the laws of war mixed together with laws involving self-defense, and I think we're still far away from getting what we want, which is a clear legal justification for not only drone strikes generally, but specific cases. You know, how does the U.S. justify drone strikes in Yemen versus Pakistan versus Afghanistan, when these are different types of contexts that we're talking about? And how does it justify specific strikes against specific individuals? And so far, the U.S. has been pretty unwilling to release that information, which is necessary to really determine what's going on here and to ensure accountability when there are violations of those laws.
Philip, do you agree with Maria? A, and B, please tell me, as a counterterrorism expert, how delicate is the line that the government has to draw between what the government says is imminent, a plan in action, or as they're described in the paper, not necessarily a plan in action, but an individual that does plan something, has done so in the past, and has not, stopped doing that?
I mean, to me, I'm not a lawyer, but the discussion about imminence to me is less critical than the discussion about the question of whether someone is engaged in operational activity, that ongoing operational activity, to plan or execute a strike. When you're collecting intelligence, whether that strike is going to be tomorrow or next month is very hard to determine. But if, for example, you have someone who's been trained by an individual who says, that individual is training us to build backpack bombs to come back to Paris or London or New York, I would say, in my mind as a practitioner, not as a lawyer, that's an imminent threat. I don't know when that trainee is going to make it to the United States or to Britain or to France. So to my mind, the real question is, can you show that the individual that you're targeting or collecting against is involved in operational activity that poses a threat? And then imminence, you're not going to have enough information on that plot typically to know whether that plot is going to proceed tomorrow or next month. So I know imminence will have legal significance, but as a practitioner, that's a pretty fuzzy area.
Maria, let's bring in another Facebook comment, and I want you to, let's talk about that as we bring it in. Mr. Aftab Alam, and this comment is in favor of drones. He says, drones must continue until every last terrorist is wiped out. Good job by the USA. Maria, does the success of the program justify it? Does what Philip just said, if the program's able to stop people before they reach USA, does that justify it?
I think we have no idea what's going on with the program. We don't know if the program is being successful. We don't know how many civilians it may be killing. I think it's really impossible to say whether the program itself is justified without knowing a lot more about it. Certainly, the use of drones can, in certain contexts, be legal, or rather the types of attacks, targeted killings, which is what we're talking about here, can be legal if you're talking about an armed conflict. The big question is this really an armed conflict in all the situations that we're talking about? And are these people directly participating in hostilities? Or is the U.S. expanding and expanding the notion of what it can do in a way that's dangerous in terms of the precedent it's setting for the world?
Now, you just said, how do we describe if it's an armed conflict? How would it be described an armed conflict under international law? And some also argue that this may be a case of international law not up to date with the new kind of warfare that's out there.
As I said before, there's a set of standards that applies to define an armed conflict. The U.S. believes that it's in an armed conflict with Al-Qaeda. The question is, in places like Yemen or Pakistan, when you have places that are not clearly a defined battlefield like Afghanistan is, what can you do? There's some understanding that when you're talking about people who are directly participating in hostilities, that you might be able to target them. But if the laws of war don't apply for whatever reason, then it's a very different analysis. And this whole issue of imminence actually doesn't really come into play.
Okay, so let's move on to another aspect of it, which is violating another country's sovereignty. Again, under international law, I want you, especially Maria, since you deal with the legal aspects of it, to comment, which is the U.S. justified in saying it's okay for us to go into another country's territory and take out a potential terrorist because the country is either unwilling or unable to do the job itself?
Again, that boils down to whether there's an armed conflict. Now, what we're talking about is whether there is a justification for an act of war. That's what we're talking about there.
So what you're
Now-
suggesting is that if an act of war, a justification can be provided for it, then the U.S. can potentially go into another country's sovereign territory and take out somebody.
This gets very tricky. Normally, what I deal with is the laws of war once you are at war.
Okay.
Whether there is a justification or not is a very complicated question. The U.S., all I can say is that the U.S. is offering a very expanded account of who it's at war with and where. And even the notion of who belongs to Al-Qaeda has expanded. You now have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, you have Al-Qaeda in Somalia. And I think it is a very dangerous precedent to have the U.S. starting to say, well, anywhere in the world that there is a person who is plotting against us, we can target them. I'm not sure the U.S. would feel so sanguine about this if we're talking about China going after an ethnic Uyghur in New York City that the U.S. was unwilling to apprehend.
And you point out a very interesting point, Philip. I want to come to you with this. Is this a case of the U.S. Not realizing, or maybe you know that the U.S. does realize and is working on it, that the U.S. is not going to monopolize the drone technology forever? What if Russia, China, or other countries start using it for the very same purposes that the U.S. is using it?
I think this is the really interesting part of the question. To my mind, there are two separate things we have to consider here. The first is the effectiveness of these operations. I think that's, I personally, I know this is not agreed upon. I would take that off the table. As an insider, extremely effective operations. The other question is the appropriateness, and that involves obviously the legality. To my mind, that is the more interesting question. When you're in a war zone, like Afghanistan or Iraq, I would just simply view this as another way to deliver a weapon. When you're in a country like Yemen that's requesting assistance, to my mind also that clearly falls within an area that the U.S. should pursue in the future. The real question is going to be, as you say, when you get into disputed areas where we might have differences of opinion, for example, let's say in Syria, with the Chinese or the Russians, what happens when that technology starts to expand, like what we saw in the nuclear race decades ago? I think there's going to have to be conversations about how different players, Russians, Chinese, Iranians, Americans, can execute strikes in places where there is potentially not an imminent threat. I wouldn't see an imminent threat from Syria, for example, and where there is not a uniform, universal understanding that that battlefield is an area we should be intervening in.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying, that this is something, is this a case of the technology going ahead of the laws, or Maria, is this a case of the laws are already out there, it's just the interpretation of them that needs to happen?
No, I think the laws are there. I don't think the technology changes the laws necessarily. This is a decision by the U.S. to use its technology in ways that it hasn't before. I mean, in theory, the U.S. could have used any number of weapons in Pakistan and Yemen, also for targeted killings, and they would raise the same legal questions. You know, drones make that easier, for sure, and but the bottom line legal questions about when it's okay to target someone remain the same. Now, there is a separate issue, which is, you know, with the proliferation of drones, potentially, of armed drones. Already there are many countries that have surveillance drones. You're going to have other countries also tempted to use them in these ways. And as drones evolve and become smaller, even harder to detect, there will be a need probably to review how to control them.
Okay, now Philip, I want to go back to one thing you said, which is they're very effective. Is this a loss of American propaganda machine or American PR people that while the drones are considered very effective by the U.S. administration, and you read something like the Long War Journal that reports that 3,000 terrorists have been killed versus only less than 200 civilians, and yet you go to on the ground places where drones are being used and the population's up in arms, and it sounds like a lot more civilians are being killed.
I think my answer to that would be, aside from the fact that any war is tragedy, I'm not just saying that. Having lived through this for 10 years, it takes a toll on you. But again, going back to being a practitioner, you have a fundamental choice. And that choice is not whether you alienate a population by taking a shot or you don't take a shot. That choice is there is somebody that you have information on who is plotting to send people, let's say, to London or New York to conduct an attack. Or more simply, plotting to send people across the border into Afghanistan to hit military forces there. You have the capability to stop that operation. Now, that capability comes with risk. As you say, there's been civilian casualties in this campaign. The question I would have, though, is that's a yes or no answer. Are you going to take out that operator or not? It's not a long-term strategic question of whether you're alienating a population. It's if we choose not to take this strike, the risk that an innocent civilian in New York City or Chicago or London will die is higher. That's a tough place to back away from.
Some people have argued, though, that drone strikes, if used more judiciously, might have been more successful, but they have almost taken the form of policy rather than being a strategic weapon. That during the Obama administration, the rise in drone strikes suggests that the administration's almost using it as a policy weapon, not a strategic weapon.
Sure, it is part of a policy. I wouldn't dispute that. I wouldn't agree that it is the policy. But to me, the broad question is, and this question is going to get broader over time, is as this phenomenon of terrorism expands into places like the Sahel, and as we've seen it expand into places like Yemen and Somalia, is the elimination of senior leaders of these organizations and of their entire networks by drones, is that an acceptable way for America to intervene? To my mind, that's not a tactical policy decision. That's a broad strategy that says we will go into places where we see threat and we will use this new technology to mitigate that threat.
But some also suggest that this very idea that this drones are used not in a very transparent way, nobody has access to it. When I talk to my State Department sources, they say, well, we know it's happening, you know it's happening, we're not allowed to talk about it. Is that hurting America in the long run? More people are being recruited by terrorists, particularly using the argument of drones.
Well, first, I would dispute the fact that more people are being recruited by terrorists. I think terrorism is dying as a global phenomenon, and I think the threat to the United States is far less than it was even 5 years ago. But I think that America has to be seen as a place where rule of law dominates. I think that the drone debate should enter more into the public domain. Let me make one point, though. This argument that this is an opaque process, I don't buy it. When you have somebody, whether it's in Yemen or Pakistan, and you have intelligence on that person that says they're plotting against the United States, and you can locate that person, you're going to shoot them. I mean, I know people would like to see what's behind the curtain. It's not that complicated. We shoot people who are involved in operational planning against the United States. It's just not that... It's not, people want to make it more three-dimensional than it is.
Well, even the president hinted to it in his State of the Union address when he said in a democracy, people can't just take it for granted that the government's always going to do the right thing. So some human rights activists, and Maria, I'd bring you in, have argued that we just cannot take CIA's word for it that they're targeting the right people. Somebody needs to have oversight. Maria, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what the U.S. has said so far is trust us. You know, we're the good guys. You know we're doing the right thing. You know that we're targeting the right people and that we're not suffering too many civilian casualties. And all these stories that are put out there in Pakistan are false. But the fact is, on a pragmatic level, it does harm the U.S. because the U.S. doesn't come out and confront the stories with the hard facts. And if there are fewer civilian casualties than people are saying, then it should show that. But aside from that, it makes it really impossible for independent observers to assess the legality of what the U.S. is doing, to figure out what's happening in specific strikes. It really wouldn't be that hard to release more information, redacting information that's that's especially sensitive. And another part of this is we've argued for moving responsibility for drone strikes from the CIA to the military, which has a much longer history of participating in armed conflict and implementing the Geneva Conventions and doing the analysis of who's directly participating in hostilities and who is and the proportionality tests that would be required to make sure that this is legal. The military would also have a better system in place to compensate people who are improperly hurt and to hold accountable people who do engage in abuses or carry out drone strikes inappropriately.
Okay, Phil, what would be the problem with having it move from CIA to the military? Is that something that people are thinking about inside the administration? Is it on the table? Do they like the idea? Do they dislike it?
It's something that has been discussed. Even John Brennan has, my understanding is, has endorsed the idea of moving the responsibility for these strikes to the military. I think that it's something that's still very much subject to debate. So we'll have to see what goes on. But certainly the president's words about transparency were a positive signal, and we hope that he keeps, and his administration keeps moving much further in that direction.
Philip, what do you think? Good idea, bad idea?
I think the move to the military, to me, makes some sense. I'm not sure I have strong views on that. I think the more significant issue, though, is this question about exposing or providing more transparency on the process of targeting. I can see some of that happening. Obviously, some of it is always going to remain obscure. At the end of the day, though, you're still going to end up with the question of whether people are comfortable with intervening in a place like Mali or Algeria or Yemen with these kinds of weapons. I think when people look behind the curtain, they're going to say, this is less interesting than I thought. The process is pretty clear. So then, you boil down to the policy question. Do you want the United States doing this? As opposed to the question of whether you're comfortable with every target that's selected.
Okay, so in the last few minutes of the program, let's talk about the way forward. And I also want to bring up another tidbit that's kind of related to our discussion. Outgoing Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta announced that he wants to introduce a new medal for drone operators. Maria, it's not very significant, but does that send a particular kind of message to the world? And B, what should be the way forward from here to be able to use drones, but also to stick with the international law?
I mean, to me, that's sort of a secondary issue, but really tackling this question of transparency, of making clear what the legal rationale is, making sure that the U.S. is not setting a dangerous precedent for other countries, is the key of it. And as I said before, I hope that the U.S. does move forward with making much more information available to the public, that we can actually have that debate over the policy issues, assuming the legal issues are even clear.
Philip, last 15 seconds, what do you think should be the way forward?
There should be more debate about how this is used, because I believe over time there are going to be questions about things like Mexican cartel leaders, who are a much bigger threat to the United States than terrorism. We have just gotten the tip of the iceberg on this, and we need a national conversation about what people are comfortable with.
Okay, so you say we need a national conversation. Maria just said that she hopes the U.S. moves forward with more transparency. We want to hear what you have to say about drones, about U.S. policy, and what the U.S. has to say. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have to discuss this important issue today. I want to thank our guests, Maria McFarland of Human Rights Watch and Philip Mudd of the New America Foundation. Don't forget to leave your comments. We go through every single one of them. And don't forget to tune in again next week for another episode of Access Point. Goodbye.